Howdy, all you delicious people. I'm here today to review Shooter from 2007. So, really, I can say first immediately, like, this film feels a little bit like this movie that I saw at one point called Most Wanted from 1997. And a lot of people could probably go and watch that movie like, it's completely different. I'm like, okay. It feels similar, weirdly. But anyways, and a lot of people will be like, I can't see that film conveniently on Netflix right now. Like, oh, I'm sorry. If you go through any of the reviews of which that I've done through recent time, you'll probably find some review where I talked about certain apps where you can go on and watch a certain number of things for free. But conveniently, this movie is on Netflix right now. And I would honestly say, besides there being a series of The Shooter, if you don't know, which currently has Ryan Felipe in it, at some point somewhere, you could probably watch that. Amazon? Not quite sure. Just kind of figure that out. Search it. Go on. Just, yeah. But anyways, so obviously, by the way of which that there is to have been a series that came afterwards, Shooter is probably a good film, right? Yeah. Hence why my hesitation about reviewing it, because simply like this is easily to be dubbed a good film in or a great film, really. Um, really, I just don't think that it has like good rewatchable value. Because at some point, I'm just like, this is like a cookie cutter action movie that just like we consistently have Bob Swagger who's consistently defying the odds in this film. It's like, oh, how is he going to get out of this situation? Like, to me, it also kind of comes off as like the Born Identity movies or like any spy movie that I've ever seen in my life. Or really, it just kind of just. Bob Swagger is technically the boogeyman. So, like, watch after this man because he's coming for you. Like, it kind of comes off as that. Again, first time around, you can enjoy this movie. It'll be a great action movie that you've seen, and even though it's kind of like a sniper movie too, which is kind of fascinating, it's like a sniper movie that really actually does first time around keep you well interested. But as you continue to watch it, it just starts to like follow the repetitious times that you watch it, it kind of just falls apart. It's just kind of like, man, it kind of feels like those 80s action films. Like, it really feels like Rambo or like uh, any number of those just cliche ish movies where like the action star like makes mistakes, but then he goes on and has this unique way to heal himself, and then man, you better look out. You better watch out because he's coming. Yeah. And plus, also, we have to have a number of people in this film that are like, you know what? I can't believe that Bob Swagger did this. I have to go and figure out how exactly he did not do this. I have to figure it out. It kind of becomes like, man, just with this movie. But I would still rewatch it. Like, I eventually would still rewatch it, even though I'm just like, man, this movie's so cookie cutter. But still, there would be points, of course, where I would still get in a weird, goofy, sadistic enjoyment out of it. I don't know. But anyways, because I probably just wouldn't remember because it's been so long since seeing it from the last time. But anyways, what is this movie about? Besides this character being a snipered Esh-like character, what is going on teeing it up for this film? Letting you know how this goes on. So, we find out that Bob Swagger is to be this retired military man who is to be called upon by his country from a guy who is to be Colonel Isaac Johnson, who's Danny Glover within this film, not to be confused with Donald Glover, who is, I guess, the singer. Anybody would probably get those confused. Danny Glover is the Lethal Weapon guy. Or is like, you really are crazy, Riggs. You really are that guy. I'm too old for this. That guy. The guy from Saw. Why does he keep telling us who Danny Glover is? I don't know. Let's go on. So, we also have Michael Pena, the guy from Ant-Man and a number of other movies eventually at some point. Also this one. So, moving on. So, Bob Swagger is to go on and decide whether or not he wants the president to get assassinated. And so Bob Swagger is going to be the only one in the world to possibly to be able to prevent a presidential assassination, because it seems that these people have decoded somehow or another that there is going to be a president assassination. So Bob Swagger has to come in and prevent this assassination. So really, of course, we have Isaac, who is just like, yeah, I think he's the guy. I think he's gonna want to do this. I think because he's Mark frickin' Wahlberg. I think he's probably so. Swagger decides to go on and take this job, and is trying to figure out where another sniper would try to go on and take down the president. And of course, Swagger, who is to be a sniper himself, is to try to rationalize what is the real perfect spot where this shot will be held. So, all of a sudden, after the assassination attempt is, of course, to happen, everyone is all scrambling, everybody's to get out of there, and we end up, of course, finding out that a lot of people are pinning Bob Swagger, of all people, on the death of what is to be a president, but not the president. So, and chasing Coors, and chasing down Bob Swagger, trying to pin him on this, kind of becomes like the Michael Douglas movie, The Sentinel, where, of course, Michael Douglas is kind of running from everybody, and, like, Kiefer Sutherland is like, oh, I'm gonna get him, even though, like, technically we're the best of friends. It's kind of like those very cliche-ish, like, stories and whatever that you've kind of heard a million times over. So with that said, let's just go into spoilers about this film, because I've technically teed it up. So let's go out of our way to say that it's about that time to go into this thing that is to be called spoiler time. Spoiler time. It's about that time again to spoil this movie. So let's get into it. So the thing that I forgot about, or I didn't mention the cryptic sense, I'll play it out within spoilers, because follow your nose. So Bob Lee Swagger, of course, is going on and doing a military mission with, of course, a man who is to be called Donnie Fenn. Donnie Fenn. So this is a military sanctioned mission that I guess is to be done by some private contractors. And so we have Swagger starting to pop off some enemy forces, and all of a sudden that ends up getting a helicopter kind of swarming upon both Swagger and both Donnie here, and Donnie gets shot in the process, and the contractors who were going on and doing this mission were pulling the plug and considering everybody who was kind of working with them expendable, leaving, of course, Bob Swagger to decide, well, frickin', you know what, I'm out of here. Like, F this, like, I'm done. Because, of course, like, my partner's killed, like, they left me for dead, and Swagger knew that. So, Swagger, of course, washed his hands of military and country, and decided to go on his own on some log cabin somewhere, farting around with some dog named Sam. who of course is to be able to hand him beers and stuff from fridges, that's got to be cool. So we of course have Colonel Isaac Johnson, who is to try and seek out a number of bigwig people who are to be the best at uh, kind of figuring out sniper-esque like stuff. And so Johnson here, of course, is to hire both Michael Sandor, or no wait, um, my bad. Uh, okay, that was weird. Um, because I was like, what the? Because this guy has a very weird, goofy name, and I think that they might have goofed at somewhere in the thing of this. Because he should have a weird, goofy name that doesn't make sense. But anyways, pushing on. So, and then they hired, of course, Swagger, because when they go to his place, and Isaac Johnson is to toss this medal of valor or something like that to Swagger and say like, "Hey man, like I want you to prevent the assassination of our president because I don't want you to go on the TV and a week later and realize that you could have prevented his assassination." And so Isaac Johnson, of course, leaves with all of his men as Swagger is to go on and take a picture of these plates and not the real engine. As they immediately are just like, yeah, like, did you guys see what he did? Like, he wanted to just do some counterintelligence because he's to be really good at what he does. So, Swagger is to go on and test the possibility of there being a shot taken against the president, and if Swagger can shoot from a good distance to take this guy out, then the president should be worried. So Swagger decides to go on to the location, or one out of the three locations that he is to think is to be the best chance of this assassination, which ends up it being Philadelphia, because Eagles sportswear at one point that Swagger is to be holding on to. Because the other three locations, of course, were either to be suicide missions or there's just no way to be able to uh, do those kinds of missions. So the best bet is to wait for Philadelphia. So we have these characters going on, and like, well, Swagger, we're gonna need a spotter. You gotta like come with us and see what is gonna play out for this whole day. And so we have them go on, and we have a kind of street officer, bizarrely, that's here, and I would have just kind of immediately had some red flags be flashing, but I guess this is just regular old Swagger here. So just like not really thinking about anything. And so this officer Timmons is to have his gun undone, and Swagger is to notice that. And so like we just had this kind of street police officer who's just kind of here just because. But really, we find out that he's actually there to try and kill Swagger and shoot him twice. One, of course, in the shoulder or by the shoulder. It's kind of like almost like armpit eshed. And then one, of course, that's kind of like by the hip and try to take him down. So Swagger is going on and telling the guys like exactly when this shot is going to be taken. Uh, he's kind of going on and saying it's like, well, hey guys, if you're going to take him down in 10 seconds. Like, do it now, do it, or he's going to shoot. So what happens instead is we find out that the United States president is not getting killed, it's some other one. So we now go on and have everybody like scrambling, like, oh my god. And so Swagger ends up getting shot multiple times. And so when Swagger is to leave, all of a sudden we have a FBI officer who, of course, is being Michael Pena, who's actually Nick Memphis. Memphis. Uh, Nothing wrong with Memphis. I just thought it was like, really? His name is Memphis? Okay, sure. Anyways, so Bob, of course, or Swagger, of course, is telling Nick here, who is Michael Pena, that he's like, hey, I didn't shoot the president. They set me up. And he's running off. So all of a sudden, this officer who was the guy who had shot Swagger is like, hey, he's not getting away. I shot him twice. And so Nick sadly had been taken down and had been handcuffed. And so we have it consistently where Nick is feeling like awful because of the fact that he's an FBI agent. And of course, Timmons is to be this kind of regular cop. And like, why wasn't Swagger easily like taking that guy down? But anyways, so they go on and they plan all this evidence. They go and take a gun that, of course, was at Swagger's place, and they kind of place it to where it would seem that he had shot somebody. And immediately within this story, there's something that really does not hold up, because in the scene of which that they kind of place this character's gun, why is it that like the Swagger's gun is on the inside, and we have Timmons who said that there was a gun barrel that was kind of poking outside of the window? Doesn't make sense. And so, like, immediately that kind of ruins the film right then and there, where it seems like, why is this guy having his gun way outside into cover the room? But with Timmons' story, weirdly, the gun barrel was sticking out of the window. It doesn't make sense. But it is what it is with this story. So, plus also Nick is to mention later on in the film that Swagger is to be too good of a shot to not exactly shoot whatever his target was. There had to have been a reason why this guy was dead. The other guy. So, the other guy who was supposedly shot in this movie, who wasn't the president. And so, really, I don't know who that actually is. Archbishop? Yeah, it was the Archbishop, my bad. Desmond Montanamo? Montombo? Yeah, there we go. That guy. My bad. Pushing on. So, Jack is to go on and steal Nick's car, and so he's driving one-handed through the streets of Philadelphia. Big ups to Philadelphia. Cool. Like, because we have kind of Mark Wahlberg that likes to do a lot of Philadelphia movies. Hence, when we would get like The Fighter, or like he just loves kind of doing Philadelphia films. And so recently, there's a number of them that kind of take place there, conveniently, for your viewing pleasure. Anyways, so Swagger goes on and he drives, and so we have it at one point where they kind of know like his plates and everything like that. They know where he's heading, and and so Swagger is kind of swerving around, and so it gets to the point in this film where we have Swagger going through this car wash, and so Swagger is going on and tearing a knife, that makes no sense, taking a knife and tearing into this back seat to grab a bunch of items that Nick is to conveniently have here, that is to kind of do some kind of temporary healing properties, like kind of gunpowder that he kind of like shoves into the bullet. or really we could have it where like Swagger could have conveniently found some dirt somewhere and probably just kind of put that into the wound to kind of like help with the bleeding, because I've seen that in the movie like Lone Survivor, where they would go on and just kind of pour dirt weirdly in their wounds for whatever odd like reason. So you can see it in Lone Survivor. It's just kind of like, I'm like, okay, that's I guess that's one way to just kind of like stop the bleeding of some kind of injury. So, but that's going to, of course, be a temporary fix, and Bob is going to eventually need to cut the bullet out of his shoulder. But I don't know about the bullet that's down below. I think they mostly just kind of focus on the shoulder bullet. Uh, Maybe the other bullet like went completely through. Anyways, pushing on. So we immediately have Isaac Jack Johnson, who's saying like, "Well, he's gonna bleed out in like 20 minutes. We're gonna find him in some dumpster somewhere." Wrong. And so what happens is Swagger is, after this whole car wash, he then gets out of this car, and the police are to find him again. So what he ends up doing is he decides to go on and crash this car off this pier. And so Swagger is to go on and find some boat, and he grabs onto like the netting or some kind of anchor part of this boat. Uh, I would probably say that it's more like netting, because it wouldn't make sense to anchor and the boat is moving. That would make sense. My apologies. But Swagger is holding onto this boat, let's just say, to perfectly. Yeah. So he's holding on to this boat, and so it seems that Swagger is going to get the getaway. We kind of have the fugitive moment where we, of course, have the acting FBI officer, who, of course, is to be a guy that's not easily on the freaking IMDb. Heaven forbid, right? Whatever. Because, of course, why? What? Howard Purnell. There we go. So, when Nick is to make his way back into the office, he, of course, is talking to Howard, his superior, and we have Nick kind of relaying to his superior that Swagger was saying that he didn't do it, that he was getting set up, and Howard is just like, well, like, I wouldn't put that in your report, because maybe you need to, like, refresh your memory about, like, what you're really hearing. And Nick is just like, well, maybe after the report is already written, maybe I can look at it and then I can remember it. And Howard is just like, really? Like, okay. So, more about Swagger. So, Swagger is to go on and conveniently find this car that is at this site that he kind of has this kind of this uh, kind of thing under or thing over. It's a little kind of tarp or whatever. Swagger goes on and takes this car and is to make his way to this store where he's going to buy a number of items: sugar, water, and certain like needles and stuff like that. And so later on, people are to find that this guy was to go on and do this, and they're trying to figure out like why exactly he was to go on and do this. And come to find out that Swagger was using, of course, these items as like an IV, because he also had this like this car hose that he was kind of using as this IV drip, so he can kind of have a temporary solution to his issues, his problems. So they kind of figure that out, that it's kind of a very old-fashioned way uh, to be able to help Swagger kind of limp on. So we then transition to have Swagger meet with Sarah. And Sarah, of course, to have a shotgun by her door. And so Swagger, of course, is telling Sarah, it's like, well, hey, I didn't do whatever they said that I did. Like, you know what? If you're gonna go and take that shotgun, go ahead and pull the trigger. Just make sure you do it fast, like, because I have nowhere else to go. So, like, Bob is, or Swagger is to tell Sarah who exactly he is, and Sarah's like, well, I know. And here's the thing, though, like, Swagger did do a really good thing by sending a number of letters to Sarah because, like, really, like, he was very, like, distraught about his partner getting killed. And so Sarah, already realizing that Swagger was a good guy and that Donnie had talked about Sarah on their mission because she had, or Donnie had a picture of her, so Swagger knew exactly who or what she looked like. So Swagger goes on and asks Sarah if she is to be a nurse still. And Sarah's like, no, I never could go into nursing because blood kind of made me sick. So we have Swagger just going on like, oh my god, like I'm gonna ask her to have to like take this bullet out and help me, and she's not even a nurse. Well, so they go on and they have to kind of do a very interesting way uh, to have Swagger get surgery done, and Sarah is to go on and take this bullet out, and it's kind of like the Robert De Niro movie Ronin, where they had to go on and pull the bullet out, and Robert De Niro's character is like, "Yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and pass out now." Like, good job, everybody. I'm gonna go ahead and pass out. So, so Swagger goes on and he takes all these like whippets, and he's like, "Well, like go on and try to get like all the infection out, all the bad stuff, and hopefully it doesn't get infected later." So like best of luck. I'm gonna go ahead and pass out now. So we kind of see just kind of Sarah kind of like putting her hands to kind of Swagger's body, and then we cut to like, oh yeah, he's fine. Everything worked out perfectly. So when Swagger, of course, is to wake up, he is to be perfectly fine, and so he's kind of like working off his injury, and eventually Swagger is to mention that he's going to at some point uh, force these bad guys to go on and find Nick so Swagger can use Nick to help him try to clear his name. But Swagger has to kind of use Nick as bait for a little bit here. So we also have a moment where like Swagger and Sarah are kind of talking about Donnie, and Swagger is to mention how he feels bad uh, for what he had done. And Sarah's mentioned that they killed Swagger's dog, and Swagger, of course, was really he loved that dog so much. And in the beginning of this film, when the guys are kind of approaching his house to get him in on this mission, Swagger is like, "Hey, if you hurt my dog, I'll kill you and bury you upside the hill. Like if you go on and you call the sheriff, like I'll tell him exactly what happened and he'll be completely fine with it because he's that kind of guy." Like so, yeah. Swagger is very intimidating in this movie. So so we have Swagger and Sarah who are having this like moment where it's like they're kind of like they're pressing up against their heads, but like we don't see like them kissing or them having this like emotional moment because like I'm sure with this movie they're probably just like, yeah, like we're not gonna kiss in this film, like no, uh like really we could just kind of tell that they're going to end up together, but like we're really not going to like uh, see them like do anything more than just kind of like press heads together and that's about it for this film because they're just like no like if I don't have to kiss somebody I'm not gonna want to. Swagger also made the asking which was kind of this joke where Swagger was asking Sarah if she's been with anybody because Swagger didn't want to have to shoot somebody that randomly came in there. And Sarah's like, oh no, like, it's been 3 years, like, but I haven't really moved on, yada yada yada. So, Swagger is gonna feed Nick to, of course, Isaac's men. So, what happens is that Sarah is going to give Nick information that's going to lead them and this is information that Swagger already had about these license plates. So we of course have Nick who's to look into these license plates afterwards, after Sarah is to leave from this diner and Swagger is going on and having to beat up a number of policemen because he was to be found out and they're like, hey sir, take off the hat. You know, just so Swagger goes up and beats a number of police officers, very Born Identity like, and is to scramble out of there, taking off his Philadelphia jacket, how dare you, and tosses it in the trash to put on a hoodie. I'm not from Philadelphia, but like I respect a place that's kind of been like a place with good films and good movies in Philadelphia. Anyways, so moving on. So, sacrilege, I tell you, sacrilege. Swagger goes on and is to now have push to Nick look up these plates, which makes Nick find out who these people are. And so these people are after him for looking up this information. So it seems like there's a number of thugs that go on to try and take down Nick. These thugs, of course, are to be Mr. Rate and a number of other people. No, wait. Nope, didn't get that right. Just a number of agents that, of course, are working with Isaac here. So, Swagger is to know this. Swagger is to basically follow Nick, and so he uses this kind of goofy silencer to take these guys out. Nick, of course, is strapped into a machine that is to supposedly shoot himself, and these guys are saying that this machine is pretty accurate. They've done it before. They've used it before. So Swagger, of course, is to save Nick, and so Nick is to finally believe Swagger is telling the truth because there's so many holes that Nick was to already have, but this kind of sealed it up here, and so Nick is kind of telling Swagger there could have been another way for him to do for him to just kind of come in, and he could have prevented all this from happening. But Swagger is like, well, hey, you're gonna believe me now, aren't you? Like, there's somebody like behind the scenes just kind of working on this. So that means that both of these characters need to go on and figure out who is to be possibly putting this all together, and they need to also go on and find some certain information. So these two characters both make their way to, of course, this gunnery man who is to know like all kinds of gun information. And so this, of course, leads these two characters to make their way uh, to meeting up uh, with this gunnery sergeant like guy who is to have this information. Of course, heaven forbid you have him in IMDb, right? Whichever. Anyways, so this eventually leads them to go on and talk about a certain number of people. One of them being actually Bob Swagger himself, without this guy realizing that he's talking to Swagger. And another guy, of course, that this really leads to is Michael Sandor himself, the guy who, of course, was in the wheelchair in the early stages of the movie, and when we kind of find him later on, he's in crutches. So we get the guy who tells about Michael's story on how he, of course, was. Um, Sherbegia. Sherbegia? Anyways, very odd name. Anyways, so I guess that's his real name, but still. Anyways, pushing on. So going to this movie, uh, we go on to have these characters make it to Virginia and to make it to meet up with Michael. So unless IMDb is completely wrong here, because I know this guy has a very goofy last name, but it is what it is with this film. Anyways, so they meet up with Michael, and so Isaac is talking to the senator, and he's mentioning that he needs 24 men to go on and try to take down Swagger at this spot in Virginia. And they're kind of having Michael as this bait, and Michael is realizing that he's probably going to get killed off here. So, and Swagger is to immediately realize that he was to have already seen this guy, and he was introduced to him before. So, and also that gunnery guy was going on and talking about a papered patched bullet, and that's how they could go on and try to and do that shot. Because I guess there's a number of kind of custom made kind of bullets and whichever. So, pushing on. So, we go into this film. Swagger is to kind of easily take down the four guys to get to, of course, Michael. Taking these guys out and kind of placing a number of certain kind of homemade bombs and such that they had to go to this store to buy a bunch of stuff. So, as we have Swagger that's consistently talking to Michael and mentioning about the 800 containers of all the dead bodies through this to make it to where they can get this oil pipeline, and there's 800 bodies in containers and so on and so forth. So, and they had to go on and shoot this guy to stop this information from getting out. So, and we also find out that Swagger was to technically help these men from getting out of their from getting off of their mission, and he was going on and shooting a number of people down, so these guys could escape. So Swagger, without knowing it, helped out these guys do their mission without even realizing it. So that kind of sucked. So all of a sudden, these guys are swarming in. We of course have Nick here that's telling Swagger that these men are coming. So Michael is to shoot himself in the head, and so Swagger at this point is to be told before Michael dies that they have his woman. Because, of course, Sarah was to be at home, people were breaking in, and of course, we have the guy who is to be Jack Payne, who is to be played by um, uh, Elias. Of course, a lot of people know him as Casey Jones, or a number of other roles, probably at some point. But yeah, so Jack Payne is to go on and grab Sarah and is to kind of have her being tortured and beaten and battered and whatever, either for information or just because they can, oddly enough. So I wanted to kind of like, I could easily kind of like just get that through a part of this movie because, like, when I have to kind of mention it, because I'm not going to go, and then Sarah, like, it has to be kind of perfectly placed for when the story, and anyways. So, Nick, of course, would have to switch to where his position is. And so we have Swagger that's telling Nick exactly when to hit these certain buttons to take these certain bombs and have them explode to take out a number of these men. So could they orchestrated this perfectly so every guy is to be taken out? So the funny thing of it is that both Swagger and Nick kind of knew them going to meet with this guy was going to lead to a trap, but they're like, well, but what? Who is the trap for? Like, is the trap for Swagger, or is the trap to like kill this guy? Is it two birds, one stone kind of situation that they're trying to do? But horrifically, it fails. So, of course, the senator, of course, is to kind of mention that uh, that Isaac might be not the right guy for this job. And so we now have it where Nick is to call the FBI and kind of tell them what's going on. Uh, we also have Swagger that's wanting to call, of course, Isaac to kind of say like, well, hey, like I have a recording of Michael kind of confessing here, and so since I have something that you possibly want and you have something that I want, which of course is Sarah, let's go on and let's trade. So we now have our characters going on to this mountain location, this big ice or big snowy mountain location to meet here, to surrender things and so on and so forth, which really just kind of leads to a number of snipers' deaths and then Jack Payne's death because Sarah eventually just continues to just shoot bullets into this guy, murdering and killing him off. So Isaac is to, of course, say that he's willing to meet with Swagger at this certain location if only he can see him coming from a very long way off. So, what they think is actually Jack Swagger making his way to these people is actually Nick. Nick gets shot supposedly in the ribs, and so Swagger is to go on and murder every single other sniper that they are to have in a number of other locations. So, then Swagger, after finding out all the snipers are all dead, he then goes on to makes his way to talk to both Isaac and to talk to both the senator, Charles. So they get Sarah, and so now they're like, well, hey, like we want what we want out of the whole like agreement here. And what happens instead is that the FBI is helicoptered to make it to this mountain, and so what of course Swagger does instead is he oils up or he gasses up that whole recording because there's no way that he can actually go on and justify that no one is not going to take this and get rid of it because there's no way of knowing who to really trust here. So Swagger gets taken in by the FBI. Isaac, of course, to go on and be like, hey, we have your gun. So, like, I win, you lose, get used to it. So, all the guys are going on in their helicopter, leaving, and they're like, yeah, we're going to get the heck out of here. So, now we have it where, of course, Swagger is to go on and have this this kind of hearing or this kind of legal kind of thing here. And so what ends up actually happening with this story is that Swagger is to quickly clear his name. Because, of course, Swagger is to put a bullet into his gun and try and fire the gun. And Swagger is to say, aha, like, I removed all the gun, like, barrels. Like, I removed all the barrels out of these guns. There's no way to shoot them. You would need a micrometer to be able to figure this out. And so, like, there's no way I was to have fired this gun specifically. So, I guess I didn't shoot this guy. So, they're like, oh, okay, well, that's great. Because we also have Isaac Johnson, who's, like, at this hearing also. And Isaac is like, well, hey, like, what am I even doing here? Call the Joint Chief. Like, I don't need to be here. And, of course, the official that's kind of hearing this all out is just like, well, yeah, I get it. Like, there's been a number of big head wig characters that have kind of called in your favor. So, like, if anything, I just want you here because I can. So, we turn around and we, of course, have Nick, who gives this guy also a number of photos that is to be taken in Africa. That, of course, is to be what Isaac and his people have gone on and done, killed a number of people. And immediately this ends up getting all hearsayed, and like there's nothing they can do about it because this isn't the world court. And we, of course, have Isaac who's saying that this isn't the Horn of Africa. Like, there's nothing they can do. So, Isaac, of course, is to turn to Swagger again and says, I win, you lose. Get used to it. Or, no, he says, I win, you lose again. Goodbye. So, Swagger, of course, is to be resolved of his charges. And we have the man who is to see this case is like, well, sorry, Swagger, but like you can't go and clean things out like the Wild West and go on and just shoot anybody and call it a day. It doesn't work that way. So that kind of tells you what's going to happen next. Is Swagger is going to take the law in his own hands and to go off and find all these people and take them all out in this cabin somewhere in the Goonies or Boonies or whatever. So Isaac and Senator Charles is going on in this cabin, and they're kind of replaying, or Isaac is kind of replaying for the senator kind of what it all played out. and of course mentioning about the checks and balances speech. And so where of course we have it where Isaac is to kind of say it's like, well, you and all this other kind of jazz. So we have Swagger who goes on and is starting to gun down a number of people. And so, of course, we have Isaac and kind of the senator here kind of caught with their pants down. And so they're kind of scrambling. They're like, oh my God. We, of course, have Swagger who, I guess, to uh, shoot Isaac kind of in the throat here. He drops. He's dead. We, of course, have the senator's assistant who gets shot in the leg when he's mentioned that he is to probably hear Swagger underneath the house. There is to be a guy kind of gunning down the floor. He ends up getting killed. Swagger is to make his way back into the house, realizing that there's probably a number of gunmen that are all dead by now. So Swagger goes on and kills the senator's assistant, going on and desperately begging for his life, mentioning that, like, hey, you don't need to kill me, you don't need to kill me, but he shoots him anyways. So we, of course, have the senator who might possibly may be having a heart attack or any number of things, or just may just be like in like absolute fear against Swagger. So Swagger, of course, is to let the senator kind of catch his breath and let him go on to get to his upright seat. And so we, of course, have the senator that's mentioning to Swagger here. It's like, do you know who I am? Like, I'm the senator. And Swagger's like, exactly. He shoots, of course, Swagger in the head. And so both Swagger and Sarah are to drive off. And the movie is to end. Uh, and so, yeah, that's kind of the finishing up of this movie. Going on and saying, like, hey, like, evil doesn't prevail. So with that said, like the good guy wins, and then he drives off into the sunset. So that's really just how the movie ends. So with that said, I think I'm going to quickly get the heck out of here. Bye, buddy. Bye, buddy.